Good morning. I trust that this is going to be a wonderful week for you where you will just have your heart flooded with the message of God's love and faithfulness as we're going to deal with some practical things in today's daily devotion on how you can walk in the way you are supposed to walk as a Christian, where you walk in the victory of Jesus, where there's melody in your heart and peace in your mind as pertaining to the things of God. I'm going to read from Ephesians chapter 5, verse 14. And then tomorrow we'll continue in the Psalms, and you will now see the reason. You'll soon see the reason why I talk about this, and then revert back to the Psalms, going to Psalm 28 tomorrow. It says in Ephesians 5 verse 14, it says, "Wherefore he says, awake you that sleep and arise from the dead, and Christ shall give you light." So what he's simply saying here is, listen, let the light of Christ shine over your life and he will give you light. The context of this is simply this. As you look at Jesus and what he's done for you, he will bring forth the fruit of the Spirit in you. That's the context of Ephesians chapter 5. Look at Jesus, and then you'll find that he will enlighten your life. And he'll enlighten your life with a way of living that looks like the life of Jesus. And then you, by the way you live, on account of God bringing forth this life in you by the power of the resurrection of Jesus, will then by your life be a light showing what life is supposed to be and what life is not supposed to be. We can look at it this way. Let's say there is a place where there is a group of people. They're always busy with backbiting and trying to steal from one another, and always the one tries to be better than the other and so forth. You kind of have to be scared of each other to a certain degree. You must be on the watch out and the lookout and try and preserve your life. And then someone meets with the Lord in that group and his life completely changed, and he becomes a generous person that thinks about another before he thinks about himself, and he loves and he gives and he's kind and he always encourages, he points to the Lord and so forth. His life will then reveal the darkness that is in that area. Why? On account of the life that Christ has now given him. And that is what we can expect in the Lord. I want to tell you, the gospel of God's grace is much more than just knowing that God accepts you. It's much more than an invitation to the hospital where you will know the doctor will not reject you. It is an invitation to come to the place where the doctor will not reject you, wherein you can be healed from what destroys your life, where you can share in the quality of God's life, where you can have a life that is born from the abundance of life that is in Jesus, where who Jesus is formed and shaped in you. That's what we would find in 2 Corinthians chapter 3 verse 18, that as we look at the Spirit of God's love towards us, by that Spirit we are changed into the very same image as what we see in Jesus. Who he is shaped and formed in us, as what the Apostle Paul said, that it is not I who live, but Christ who lives in me. So you can, as you are at a place where you might be afraid and anxious and be at a place where you so wish that certain fruit of the flesh would stop in your life and so forth, you can have confidence in knowing that that is exactly what will happen to you, because you are at a place of healing. You can find here that the scripture clearly says that the fruit of the Spirit, the effect of the Spirit, is in all goodness and righteousness and truth, where it proves what is acceptable unto God. In other words, where it brings the purity of what is acceptable unto God forth in your life. Do you know it is not acceptable to God that you live in fear? It's not acceptable to him. He says it's wrong that my child lives like that. If I think of my own children, I don't want them to live in fear. I want them to know that I love them, even if it must be at a place where we can differ on something or talk about something where there might be a little bit of tension. It doesn't matter. Still, I feel that they need to be at a place where they are not living in fear and anxiety, know that I will never harm them and that I'm always there to help them and assist them. Doesn't matter what we are dealing with. In the very same way here, we find that the work of God's grace is a work wherein he brings forth his life inside us. And that is what we can expect. And that is what we should expect. So many times in history, we've been at a place where we've been thinking, well, I am who I am, and I have the problems that I have, and thank God that He accepts me the way I am. And I mean, it is good to know that Jesus Christ came for the sinner, that He doesn't condemn you when you're at the place of destruction in your life, but that He's come to save you from that destruction. Yet we have to understand that salvation does not mean, in the biblical sense, in biblical theology, salvation does not mean that we go to a place somewhere one day. That is not what salvation means. Salvation to Paul, salvation to Jesus, was to be saved from death in your life, where you can share in the life of God, where you are saved from the power of sin in the flesh, where sin in the flesh is condemned and you are not condemned. That would mean that what kills you would be killed so that you can have life as the one that God has dreamt to have life. Remember, God made man from the dust of the earth. He made Adam. And what was His dream for Adam? His dream for Adam was that his fullness would be in Adam, that Adam would experience his kind of life. And that is what we see in Jesus. That's what we see in Paul. Paul was somebody that went and had people killed, where he thought that it is by the strength of the sword and by my zeal that I will get something done. And what did Jesus do? He changed Paul to someone that would lay down his life for others. And so he was sharing in the life of God. That is what we can expect. And that is not by our own works. That is what God brings forth and promises us because He loves us. Not that He is in the need of servants in the sense of, well, I want everybody to do the things the way I do it. No, it's because God knows that is the only life there is. It's the highest quality of life there is. And that is what He makes available to us, making us whole, healing our hearts. He loves us. He says here in verse 15, He says, so then, walk circumspectly, not as fools, but as wise, redeeming the time, because the days are evil. Wherefore, be not unwise, but understanding what the will of the Lord is. Be not drunk with wine, wherein is excess, but be filled with the Spirit. Now, here he talks about alcohol. Now, when we talk about alcohol, it is always a touchy topic, because some might say, can you drink wine? Others say, can you not drink wine? And so forth. Let us just see what the scripture says and what God is after here. Now, we need to understand that Jesus Christ Himself drank wine. We need to understand that Jesus Christ Himself turned water into wine at a place where people were already drunk, and then those people said, this is the good wine. And they would normally say, well, the good wine people first give so that people can become drunk, and then they give the bad wine. So one can obviously extrapolate from that had to be wine that had some alcohol in it. But let us listen to what Paul says here. So the argument here is not can we use wine or not. I want to talk about something else. He said, do not be drunk with wine, wherein there is excess. That word excess there simply means to be a salvation. That's what it means. Like you get an atheist. The word in the Greek where it says excess simply means a sozo. It is not safe. To be at the unsafe place. So what people do, and this is what happens most of the time, you get home, you are tired, you feel the work is too much for you, and you are thinking, well, let me just relax a little bit. I don't want to think of this. And many times what happens is when we are stressed, and when people are stressed, they will rather drink something to forget about their problems. And this is what he's saying. He says, if you do that, you're not at a safe place. He says, rather be filled with the Spirit. Spirit means life. Rather be filled with the life of God. And then he explains in the next verse how you get it right. And this is something that we can practically do, something that my wife and I does. He says, speak to yourself in psalms and in hymns and in spiritual songs. So he's now dealing with people here on how to redeem the time, how to see the life of the Lord manifesting in you. He says, rather, when you are in difficult times, go to a place where you speak to yourself in psalms and in hymns and in spiritual songs. So you go and you read the Psalms, and that's what we're busy with. That's why my daily devotionals is all about the Psalms. Speak to yourself in Psalms. In other words, put yourself in the Psalms. Take what is there, speak it to yourself. I want to say, and I know this goes these messages goes far and wide, and I'm making a little bit of a long devotional today, so forget me if it goes on for another 3 or 4 minutes. But this goes far and wide. And there might be people that listen to this in the evening and they are even intoxicated. It doesn't matter. If that is you, listen, right there where you are, in that condition, let me tell you something. Speak to yourself in Psalms. Open up Psalm 1. Go to some of the devotionals that I have preached and listen to the Psalms and what it means to you. See yourself in the Psalms. See yourself in your place of distress, where you can call upon the Lord and say, like David says, God, where are you? Why are you far from me? Yet I remember that I am valuable. Lord, I'm at a place where my bones ache and I find my flesh goes to pieces and I find my enemy laughs at me and I'm going backwards, for instance. But you are faithful. You were faithful to our fathers. Go and read that. As you read that and you speak to yourself in the Psalms, and you go and get some good music that speak along those lines and listen to that, or make melody in your heart. Let this be a beautiful song, this truth of the Psalms in you. You will find that you will be strengthened, and that is how you are then filled with the Spirit. When you listen to the Psalms from a perspective where you make melody in your heart to the Lord, where you look at the finished work of Jesus, and you apply the work of Christ to the Psalms and the Psalms to your own life, and you see how where the rubber hits the road, God is one that always provides. And that is how we walk in the Spirit. We walk in the light of God giving life. And that's what I see in the Psalms, and that is why I'm preaching from the Psalms. It doesn't matter what psalm you read. At the end of the day, you come to this conclusion. Doesn't matter how dark it is. There's always a promise of life, and God brings that life. He does manifest that life, and that gives peace and hope in the here and now. So be encouraged. Let us be filled with the Spirit by seeing how the life of Jesus is practically applied to our lives, as we see how God has always been faithful to those in Bible times, where He also says He's faithful to us because He loves us. He wants our lives safe. This is what it is all about. So thank you, and I apologize for making a little bit of a long message here today, but tomorrow we'll get into Psalm 28, which is a bit of a complex psalm. God bless.